sixth webcast in our series that is done in collaboration with each of our special education regional cooperatives across the state. Our topic for today is utilizing the principles of universal design for learning to prepare for the start of school. Just a friendly reminder to please mute your mics and turn off your camera to save bandwidth so everyone can join. Also, if you have questions, there's an access code and QR code for Go Soapbox. We will use the questions for an FAQ or address them in future webcasts. So now I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Renee Hibbard.
Good morning and welcome to our session of utilizing the principles of universal design for learning to prepare for the start of the 2020-21 school year. We're excited to be here today for the sixth installment of the DOSE webcast series. Earlier webcasts have shared information on several topics. The strategies we will discuss today could be used with any student that may need more supports in the classroom. As we begin, please take a second to make sure your mic is on mute so as not to distract other viewers. This webinar was developed by a task group from the Kentucky Special Education Cooperatives. Some members of the task group will be presenting today's information. We value your input and hope you will provide feedback on the information presented by using the QR code shown here or by following the bit.ly link. The code will be shown again at the end of the presentation. This cartoon demonstrates the problem we face in today's school. Many students are expected to learn, perform, and be measured by the same standards. However, they come to us with varying abilities, talents, and challenges. As you see, despite the research stated at the top of the slide, these animals are all being asked to perform the same task of climbing a tree. Some animals, such as the monkey, will excel at this task, while it may be difficult for other animals and may not be possible at all for some, like the goldfish. According to Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, a standard learner does not exist. Rather, it is learner variation that is standard, and the UDL framework offers principles and guidelines to design instruction that addresses this wide range of learners. Universal Design for Learning is a research-based set of principles to guide the design of learning environments that are accessible and effective for all. UDL provides a framework to level the playing field for all students by minimizing barriers and maximizing learning for all students. UDL first appeared in education in the 1990s with foundations in neuroscience and universal design. The Center for Applied Special Technology, also known as CAST, began to think about how the physical requirement of universal design may be applied to an educational setting. There are three core principles of UDL. Multiple means of engagement. This is how we motivate the learners and stimulate interest in a lesson. We want to give students choices to ignite their learning. An example of varying the student engagement might be to allow the student to use a Google form to take a pretest instead of the traditional pencil and paper, or show a video on a specific topic to build in prior knowledge. Then we have multiple means of representation, how we present learning materials to the students. A good example of this is presenting text in print, digital, and audio formats and allow students to choose which version they wish to utilize. Finally, multiple means of action or expression is the way in which a student demonstrates what they know or learn during the lesson. This is the place that we allow our students to be creative, and we as teachers should accept their demonstration of learning in whichever modality they choose to show us. An example of offering options for student expression may be to allow students to create a graphic dictionary to increase vocabulary skills, or possibly record themselves while they read. Another way to look at it is that multiple means of engagement is presenting the information and content in different ways, the what of learning. Multiple means of representation is providing information in multimedia formats, along with varied supports such as including graphics or highlights to support critical features, the why of learning, and multiple means of action or expression is differentiating the ways that students can express what they know or the how of learning. One of the best resources for information on UDL is the Center for Applied Special Technologies, or CAST. We've provided a link to their website along with a QR code for those that might want to visit the site. CAST is an educational research and development organization based at Harvard University working to promote UDL. CAST explains that UDL embeds strategies into the curriculum during the planning process so that all students can access a variety of learning solutions. UDL also provides a blueprint for creating flexible goals, methods, materials, and assessments that accommodate learning differences. Universal design for learning is actually the use of instructional technology by planning to ensure that all learners have their needs met. Since UDL is very reliant on technology and it affects access to the curriculum for students with disabilities, many people confuse UDL and assistive technology. In reality, AT and UDL are two sides of the same coin. They are both intended to allow students to access the curriculum to a greater extent, but UDL is a top-down strategy, meaning that it is designed to reach down from the curriculum to the learner, while AT is more of a bottom-up strategy in that it's applied to a specific situation in which a student might have barriers in accessing the curriculum. David Rose from CAST says, UDL is really a merging of general education and special education, a sharing of responsibility, resources, and ownership. It gets away from the their kids, our kids divide between general education and special education. Assistive technology consists of tools and strategies that are used to assist students in developing and participating in meaningful academics, social relationships, and employment activities. It can range from low technology, such as unaided communication systems and sign language, to high technology, such as computers with switch interfaces. Assistive technology can be anything that helps a individual student perform a task that would be difficult for them otherwise due to any type of impairment. Instructional technology can be any form of technology if they are used to instruct or engage students in learning or for students to express what they have learned. In the image at the top right, this student needs an additional means to input information into her computer to give her access to the curriculum, while another student may use a computer to simply complete an assignment. This example demonstrates how two students can access the same instructional technology, but one student may need assistive technology to provide access. A computer can be considered both instructional technology and assistive technology, depending on the individual needs of the student. But in this example, the computer is IT and the AT is the switch used to access the computer.
So far, we've been talking about UDL in reference to education, but there's another UDL that came first, and it actually was the inspiration for Universal Design for Learning. It's the architectural theme of Universal Design for Living. Because of an aging population, along with medical advancements, which allow individuals with disabilities to be healthier and live longer, the need for accessible physical structures has become more important over the last 80 years. This has created a problem for architects who struggle with methods of retrofitting buildings and public structures to make them more accessible to a growing population of aging Americans and those with disabilities. The picture on this slide shows a building with a retrofitted ramp to allow individuals with mobility impairments to gain access. As you can see, it had to be really long with at least 2 cutbacks. This was done to ensure that the incline is appropriate for an individual to be able to push themselves in a manual wheelchair without too much difficulty. This image shows the interior of the Guggenheim Museum in New York City. It was designed from the ground up with universal design principles so that the ramp is integrated into the building. This allows all individuals to access every room on every floor in the same way, without a separate access method for those with mobility impairments. Additional advantages to this universally designed ramp include the ability to keep people out of the weather, along with the inherent beauty of the design. Retrofitted ramps and elevators are expensive, space-consuming, visually detract from the design of the structure, and often make it only marginally more accessible. In contrast, when structures are designed with and built with accessibility in mind from the ground up, the result can be visually appealing and often will be utilized by the entire population. The images on this slide show two forms of universal design strategies that we're all familiar with: curb cutouts and automatic door openers. Although these were originally designed to allow access for users with handicaps, they've also been found to be very convenient for the entire population. Architects have found that it is much better to design structures with accessibility in mind than it is to retrofit accessible features after construction is completed. This photograph is a good way to illustrate some of the misconceptions about accessibility and what universal design is really about. Some thought went into planning this parking space, but it looks like it might have been more of an afterthought. The parking space is close to the door, but could someone in a wheelchair actually get up those steps into that door? Being so close to the building, the parking space is inconvenient for wheelchair ramps, carriers, or lifts to work properly. There's really no way for anyone in a walker or a wheelchair to get up those stairs. Once you get to the top of the stairway, there's still a stoop in front of the door. And finally, after all of those obstacles, the individual would have to find a way to get the door open and hold it while they get their mobility device over the stoop and into the building. UDL would require that the parking space and access to the building were designed with every possible user in mind. Placing the handicap label on this parking spot did not make it accessible. Universal design was not considered here.
In education, we often try to provide content to our students without considering how they might access this content. For many years, the primary source of all educational content has been the printed textbook. But textbooks present specific barriers to many of our students. As you can see from the images on this slide, simply providing the text in a digital format allows us to transform the text in a variety of ways so that students with specific learning preferences or requirements can gain access to the content. In this cartoon, the adult is clearing the snow off the steps while all the students are waiting to enter the building. The adult is assuming that more students will use the stairs, so they need to be cleared first. The student in the wheelchair simply says, "Could you please shovel the ramp so we can all get in?" Planning student instruction is much the same. If we take the time up front to plan for all student learning, engagement, and assessment, we are going to have better outcomes. Much has been made of the difference between equity and equality. While equality means treating every student the same, equity means making sure every student has the support they need to be successful. Equity in education requires putting systems in place to ensure that every child has an equal chance for success. Accessibility is defined by the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education as meaning when a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services as a person without a disability in an equally integrated and equally effective manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. The key phrases here are equally integrated, equally effective, and substantially equivalent ease of use. Planning is an essential step to ensuring that equality, equity, and accessibility is available for all students. The steps that you see on the screen are the typical first steps of implementation of UDL. However, keeping in mind the challenges we have recently faced related to remote learning, it will be important to assess the readiness levels, skills, and needs of your learners and the challenges of the learning environment. Anticipate learning gaps and barriers that may distract, frustrate, or confuse learners. Apply UDL guidelines to plan for learner variability and determine what scaffolds are needed.
These pictures show multiple means of representing the same vocabulary words. As you can see from the pictures, each vocabulary word is represented with an object, a 3D model, a picture, and a word. Based on the student's needs, they can use these items to understand the vocabulary. Here are some examples of tasks with the UDL lesson. The purpose of this activity is for students to sort themselves into a house based on the Harry Potter book series. The first video shows an example of a spinner made with Makey Makey in a 3D printed sorting hat. The student touches the hat and it activates the spinner, which sorts them into a house. The second example in the middle uses simple pictures with the house names and pictures of attributes for each house. The other example requires students to answer questions that help sort them into a house. Using the principles of UDL, we would allow the students to choose whatever way they would like to sort themselves into a house. And if you look at that first example, it can be really appealing to students. And so we would allow them to sort their house using the spinner, but then challenge them to a more difficult version if that's appropriate. The substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition, or SAMR, is a model for integrating technology into a lesson. This graphic provides a nice explanation for how the components of SAMR or SAMR work together. Think about SAMR like going to Starbucks, which I'm sure we're really going to be happy to do soon. I heard maybe they're opening next week. In the first picture, we see substitution. I can make a cup of coffee at home, or I can go to Starbucks. While there may be some subtle differences in the coffee, a cup of coffee is a cup of coffee. Substituting a digital text of Shakespeare's Hamlet for a print version doesn't really change how the student reads that text, but it does change how they access it. Next, under augmentation, we see a latte. A latte is different from a plain cup of coffee. We have added something to it to change it. Similarly, if we provide an audio version of Hamlet, in addition to a digital or print text, it adds a different function. Now students with visual impairments or fluency concerns can access the text in a different way. But maybe some students would just like to hear the text because Shakespeare is difficult. Next, we have modification. Going back to our Starbucks example, a caramel macchiato tastes very different from a plain cup of coffee. Likewise, when we use modification in the classroom, we're making significant changes to the way we're presenting materials. Using our Hamlet example, what if we provide a video of a performance of the play? This video allows the student to hear the text and see the play being acted out. Finally, redefinition is using technology to completely change the activity. If you've ever had a pumpkin spice latte, you know it is much different from a plain cup of coffee. Some would argue it isn't the same thing at all. There is a virtual reality version of Hamlet in which a student uses VR glasses and can walk through this set and speak to characters. Using VR to teach Hamlet is a long way from just providing them with the text. Now, one thing to remember with SAMR is that it's not a hierarchy. One method is not better than the other. Some people like a plain cup of coffee, and some people don't like pumpkin spice latte. Also, pumpkin spice latte isn't special if you have it every day, and it isn't always good for you either. So how can UDL and SAMR work together to scaffold lessons and build in technology? Looking at this model, we can see that when we consider multiple means of engagement, all four components of SAMR, substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition, are equally represented. This is because we want to have lots of ways to engage our learners. This is an important part of bringing the students to the lesson. Substitution is a bigger part of multiple means of representation because we're thinking of all the ways we can provide access to the curricular materials. Finally, in multiple means of expression, of redefinition takes a bigger piece. I'll start over. Finally, in multiple means of expression, redefinition takes a bigger piece of the circle because we want our students to express learning in new and creative ways. It is important to note here that teachers must be willing to accept the creative output of a student as proof of their learning. We don't want to ask them to create something unique only to follow it up with a generic assessment. This is an example of strategies and technology that can be used when integrating UDL and SAMR. Using the QR code, use the QR code for a link to the full document. As you can see, each pillar of UDL is divided by SAMR categories and strategies, and supportive technologies are suggested for use in the classroom. In the sample graphic organizer, you see examples of planning process for a student named Robert. Robert enjoys the outdoors, wildlife, and hunting. Here, his teacher has created a research writing lesson plan with options for engagement, representation, and expression, while also considering technology integration using SAMR. As you can see in the graphic organizer, the teacher has chosen possible ways to engage Robert with varying levels of technology, multiple ways to represent information for Robert to gather, and finally providing options for how he can demonstrate his learning. This is a good example of a teacher providing the freedom of choice that students experience during the UDL lesson, while also providing some structure to help Robert make choices that meet his learning style, but also meet the requirements of the standard. Robert's UDL SAMR lesson is a silky segue into a discussion around student choice. Within the context of UDL, there is often a need to balance the requirements of a lesson or a standard with the need to provide students with choice. One author suggests that teachers should look at UDL like a taco bar rather than a smorgasbord. Telling students to pick what they need or want from a buffet of classroom activities may not result in a nutritious diet of learning. Having choice about their learning is empowering, but putting too much freedom and responsibility in the hands of young learners can be overwhelming. The Build Your Own Taco model allows students to make choices about learning materials they access, but limiting the number of options. Each student would need to include certain components into their final project, but they would be able to choose from a variety of options. Think of the taco bar analogy using the research writing example for Robert. He must choose a shell. On a taco bar, he would choose from crunchy, soft, flour, wheat, or corn tortillas. For his research writing assignment, he must choose a format for presenting his research, a written paper, a slideshow, a collage, or a 3D model, or he can create a video explaining what he learned. After choosing a shell on the taco bar, you get to pick a topping: meat, tofu, beans. For the writing lesson, this can include articles, pictures, or videos. Finally, you get to add condiments. That is what makes your taco unique: cheese, sour cream, onions, olives, lettuce, etc. In the same way, students can choose details they find most interesting to make their projects truly unique. Now the student has met the requirements of research writing activity, but have also been allowed to demonstrate a deeper level of learning through the freedom of choice.
By utilizing the principles of UDL and combining instructional technology along with high-quality instruction, we can provide students with a highly effective learning environment. This process of combining explicit instruction with instructional technology is known as blended learning. Blended learning is a natural development to the growing accessibility of e-learning, online resources, and the continued need for a human component in the learning experience. A blended learning approach ensures that the learner is engaged in driving his or her own learning experience. This approach also helps cater to the individual needs of the learner. Most students have unique learning styles, and a blended approach is more likely to cater to those needs than a traditional classroom teaching experience. The advantages of blended learning for students are listed in the column on the right of the screen. Notice that two of those advantages include increasing student interest and keeping students focused for longer. Besides the benefits mentioned, we have learned from the COVID-19 quarantine that schools who've been utilizing a blended learning model throughout the school year were much better prepared for handling the specific problems of delivering instruction outside the school. There are many free and easy-to-use tools available to perform the necessary functions of running a classroom remotely. Pictured on this slide are just a few of them. We encourage teachers to utilize these tools to motivate students, provide better access to the curriculum, and ensure that diverse and varied methods are present. Once again, here are the links to today's presentation and resources. Also included is a link to the Kentucky Dose Network website. Thank you for participating in the Universal Design for Learning webinar. Please do remember to provide session feedback using the link or QR code on this slide. Once again, a link to the slides for today's presentation is available on the Kentucky Dose website and the KDE website in the Instruction Resource section. We would like to thank KDE and the Special Education Cooperative Networks for the opportunity to collaborate and share best practices. We know that these webinars are a quick 30 minutes with a lot of information. Please feel free to go back and view the recording again after it is posted on the KDE website and Kentucky Dose websites. We would also like to thank you and the teachers in Kentucky for providing meaningful education experiences for all students. Please remember that the special education cooperatives are here to support you. Please reach out to your respective region for additional supports or to share resources that you have developed locally. Thanks again for your participation and have a great day.
Thank you to our presenters and for those of you participating today. The recording for today's webcast, along with the resources, will be available on the Instructional Resources page for special education on the KDE website. Thank you again for participating, and we hope you have a great weekend.